Good day and welcome to EdSpaces 2019 and Issues in Education. Here with David Reid. He is from the firm Gould Evans, and we're going to talk a little bit about what he's seen as the important things of kind of connecting all of this work at EdSpaces back to learning. And I think that's really important for us not to lose track that this isn't about stuff, it's about kids, it's about the learning.
Exactly.
Tell us a little bit about your story and your role in this big world we live in around space.
All right,
Yeah.
I appreciate that and appreciate getting off the topic of stuff.
Yes.
So, our practice has always been design-centered, driven by a lot of curious people. And I think this curiosity has really led us into bigger topics, like what do students really need to be prepared with when they get out of high school or get out of college. And it's becoming more of a national conversation, but it's surprisingly limited when we're talking with clients.
Okay.
You know, there's a few clients, districts out there developing a portrait of a graduate, but we're really interested as architects, because we're here to save the world.
Right.
So how can architecture help? How can architecture be a catalyst? And so we've actually done a lot of work aggregating 14 national, international studies on what employers deem the most critical skill sets when they're hiring. GPAs aren't in the conversation at all.
Right.
Competencies that you're getting out of curriculum are not in the conversation, maybe lightly in the resume portion, but when they're interviewing, it is about what we're calling enterprise skills or transversal skills.
I'm done with the soft skills, right? Like that's a term we don't need, right? Like I don't mind rebranding that because it really does make it a second tier citizen to the other stuff.
It does, and it's really about skills that you can transfer over multiple careers in a lifetime, which these kids are going to have. And so a lot of those skills that emerged in the top 20 out of all these different studies are things that have been in the education conversation for a while.
Sure.
You know, collaboration and working with a diverse set of stakeholders, communication, complex problem solving, creativity. So we can look at those and think, okay, we can think about space that supports those and makes it more of an inherent and passive kind of experience. The teacher doesn't have to be as intentional. But when we get into skills like that deal with the changing nature of our society driven by technology, you know, how do students manage ambiguity? How do they exercise grit? You know, how do they just deal with this changing world around them, and they're not used to that. They're used to the rubric, they're used to wanting the end goal, and so, you know, Google was kind of a leader. It said, we don't look at GPAs, and if you've got a 4.0, it's a strike against you coming in. Doesn't mean we won't hire you.
You've never failed. You've never had to
You've never
persevere.
taken a risk. And they want risk takers for innovative companies. And you should see the list of companies behind them that no longer look at GPAs. So we're trying to help districts bring this to the forefront and not make it a frightening thing for educators to say, great, we got to do this on top of everything we're already doing, but how can we do it kind of in an integrated way?
It's really layering, right? Like these things have been part of the strata, but it's which layer are they sitting on? And I think if we can move further to the top or the bottom, whatever you want the metaphor to be, as opposed to in kind of the messy middle, I think we're all going to be better off.
Right.
I've been hypothesizing about learning spaces as a career development tool. So we are going to be, like you said, in work environments that are much more fluid, different over time, and I say that there are often times where I have 10 workspaces in one day.
Right.
When do we help kids learn those skills, if not at school? So do you see learning spaces as a catalyst to helping kids with that skill as well?
It has to be, because of the number of hours spent at school. So I'm glad you brought that up. Just there's a project we recently finished called the Missouri Innovation Campus. It's kind of centered around career technical professions, which is where
beautiful.
This
I'm Missourian, so so it's a beautiful space.
But you know, when we go back and talk to students, what is it about this place that helps you transition more fluidly into the work environment? They'll say, I can work where I want to work based on what I'm doing and who I'm working with. My professor is there as more as a boss than a teacher. He's guiding them, and they're working on projects. They're designing things they want to work on when they want to work on them. They have that flexibility beyond just the bell schedule and the hours. You know, if you want to crush creativity, put kids on a bell schedule, and
right.
you got all these unfinished projects, and they're like, well, it probably wasn't important.
Time's up.
Because I wasn't given time to finish it.
Yeah.
It gives them a message. So absolutely, it's got to start in school, and we're trying to figure out how to take that idea well beyond CTE fields.
Yeah, and then hopefully you're modeling some of that in your own workplace, right? And I think that one of the things that teachers need to see and leaders need to see is that is really what's happening in the workplace. And then also partnering with organizations, whether design and architecture, other folks that can support the work of schools. How are you seeing some schools do that well?
Well, I want to back up to the comment about modeling it in the workplace first, because we actually have an experimental learning program in our office.
Okay.
And one of the really powerful things about it is, students are coming in on a daily basis, 3rd through 8th grade students. We partnered with a professor of education at Rockhurst University, run programming really centered around design thinking and entrepreneurialism. And so for kids to come into a learning space that has nothing to do with school, kind of totally defeats all the stigmas of school. They see architects and how messy we work, how we collaborate, how we struggle with these notions of ambiguity and, problem solving. They realize, oh, it doesn't look all professional and polished, and I thought it did, because we're always shooting for the A for the polished project.
Right.
It's like, no, it's about the process. So, we've seen a lot of really powerful outcomes, students coming in and just understanding where they're headed to. If they can't, if they've never seen it, they can't visualize where they're going, and they'll never understand the skills they need. When we talk to even incoming college freshmen, they don't know that these enterprise skills are critical until they're talking to their career advisor when they're getting ready to graduate, and then they're upset because it's like, why am I just now learning this?
Yeah. And even more important for kids that come from backgrounds of poverty, first-generation college kids, giving folks those experiences along the way go a long way to kind of setting them up for success as opposed to failure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So they have to visualize it to be able to consciously guide their own career, and they need to. When we talk about student agency, that's a big part of it. Is knowing what's important to guide your own learning experience.
Yeah, and I just think about my daughter right now, and I don't know that she has that, right?
It's rare,
right? And so I was a middle school principal for a long time, and I've seen just a lot of confused learners. But some of these skills we're talking about start to get us there. You guys have also been a leader in doing some work around universal design for learning.
Yeah.
I know you didn't invent it, but you're continuing to make sure that lens is on your work.
Right.
Talk about why, and then what that's looked like in practice.
So our partnership with UDL started about 2 or 3 years ago. One of the leaders in Universal Design for Learning is actually a tenured professor at University of Kansas, just down the road from our office in Kansas City. And for 20 years, when UDL was developed at Harvard, there was never any space design criteria around it. And Dr. Bashmi is like, don't you think it would be valuable to have a space design component to UDL? And he's talking to an architect, it's like, heck yeah, let's do something. And so we spent about a year trying to figure out what the best tools might be, and we came up with the UDL Learning Spaces Idea Kit. And it's designed for K-12. It's a pack of about 60 cards. Each one's got a space design idea centered specifically on one or more of the 48 guidelines that comes out of the UDL framework. And UDL is really a framework designed to make learning accessible to any learner, regardless of cognitive learning disabilities, physical learning disabilities. It really started for special ed, and as we come into personalized learning, it's like, well, it's really great for every student. And just like
as all of these special education things that we've developed are all good for all kids. Like
universal design. What's good for the disabled is good for everybody. And so we developed that in collaboration with educators and researchers around the country. And what's valuable in that toolkit, and especially as we develop this work around enterprise skills, is it bridges the language between educators and designers. We often talk in very different languages, and we all have our jargon. And the cards have been incredibly powerful to visualize ideas about space, because educators, they're really resourceful. They work with what they have, but they tend not to broaden the thinking about how their space could be that third teacher. And it helps designers really speak the language of educators. And so, as you were mentioning earlier, just the ability to empathize and relate to teachers is so critical to kind of get those conversations further.
Yeah, so the deck of cards, it really is an oversized deck of cards, and I've used it in the field with teachers and districts, and you're right, the language and the common language development, and I think that if I look at the heart of what I hope EdSpaces becomes is this furniture designers and manufacturers and educators beginning to talk the same language, because I do feel like it's been the Tower of Babel for a while, where we think we're designing for you and we're designing for this person, but we can't be with in design unless we're all talking the same language.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's been good. What else do you see? What should we be thinking about? You get a chance to see some forward-thinking trends. If you were giving some advice to schools, what all fits in that bucket for you?
Well, I was inspired by one of the talks yesterday where Ryan was talking about just not getting caught up in the stuff of the furniture, the things that are easy to relate to, but really helping schools find their why.
Yeah.
I think that's really critical, so everything's intentional. We really tend to find our sweet spot in schools that don't want to be like all the other schools and really have a particular mission and thing that makes their culture work, because the approach is really customized. And I mean, I think as we get away from the factory model of education, there's not a new model to replace it. There's like this whole ecosystem of different models that I think is exciting, but it complicates the design field.
Absolutely.
It's always a custom solution. But I think the other thing that's really critical is that our education system gives students more of a voice in their approach to learning. I think students often come in and it's like, oh, okay, so these are the rules. I don't think they fit me very well, but I guess I'm stuck with them. And that's one of the things about universal design is it both empowers educators to kind of recognize the learning barriers of each student, but it also gives students a voice and a way to articulate. Maybe they don't really understand the assignment that way, but they can relate to it better in a different means of expression. So just bringing students into the co-creation of the education experience.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for being with us today, and thanks for talking about education as a whole, because I don't want to get caught in the trap of, I definitely believe the third teacher and the learning space matters, but it has to be in sync with some really great instructional practices.
Absolutely.
So thanks for being here, David, and thanks to everyone for listening to Issues in Education from EdSpaces 2019. Thanks.
That's awesome. Thank you.